everyone. Welcome to the 3 o'clock Bridging the Gap, making your first feature session. I'm going to just introduce you to our panel straight away. So please join me in welcoming Michael Pearce, writer-director of Beast, Daniel Cockatello, writer-director of Apostasy, and Lucy Cohen, director of Kingdom of Us. Let's give them a warm welcome. And thank you all so much for being here. While they're on their way in, I just want to say we're really so excited by the lineup for this panel. All 3 films had their UK premiere at the London Film Festival. Lucy, it was your world premiere, and you both world premiered in Toronto, I believe. Yeah. All the films played in competition here, and Lucy actually won the Grierson competition for Best Documentary, and the others were in the Sutherland First Feature competition. So it's like incredible opportunity for all of you to ask them your questions as well, and I'm going to make sure we leave a lot of time for that. So have a think about what you would like to ask. I guess maybe we'll start with the trailers and clips just to give people a flavour of the work. So Daniel, maybe we could start with you. Do you want to tell us anything? I think a lot of people in the room won't have seen Apostasy
Has
yet.
anyone seen Apostasy? No. Okay. Apostasy was a film made through the iFeatures scheme, and it's about a community of Jehovah's Witnesses in Manchester. And it's about a family who have to excommunicate one of the daughters.
Okay, yeah. Let's have a look at the trailer.
I know she still has you in her heart, Jehovah. Maybe just not strong. I did pray the elders would see that.
Sorry about that.
How good did his fellowship her?
But she still wants to be in God's organisation.
She showed little sign of repentance.
I don't understand.
Maybe you haven't noticed, but we can see at this point she's really lost her relationship with Jehovah. I hope she works and that really builds it up. If you told her she was falling away, maybe we could have helped.
What should I do?
Jehovah's direction is clear about avoiding any contact with wrong pairs.
But she needs help and support now.
We realise it's tough. We must keep any necessary contact to a bare minimum. It's true of our less contact, the more it'll help Louisa realise her quicker.
Lucy, could you tell us a little bit about Kingdom of Us?
Yes, Kingdom of Us is it's a documentary about a family of 7 siblings and their mother. They lost their father to suicide, and the film follows them over 3 years as they grow up, try to sort of piece together the memories and understand what happened, and as they sort of look to the future. And it and it premiered at London Film Festival, and then it was released on Netflix, and so this is the Netflix trailer that you're going to see.
Has anyone seen the film on Netflix? Or the good news is you can go home and watch it tonight, so let's have a look at the trailer.
We genuinely have the best family in the world.
I feel like my dad, he wasn't real. I've just heard stories and I've made memories, but I wasn't actually there.
I think we're all so used to saying, like, for 6 years we're okay, but there were some days when I'm like, it's not okay, I'm not fine about what happened.
We've all got such different memories.
constantly gone through the what ifs that day.
There was a banging at the door.
I remember the helicopter flying.
It was the police.
What can we know? That day our dad killed himself.
He completely broke my heart. Dad had an idea of what a perfect world would be.
We were all going to grow up anyway, so he couldn't have kept us that way forever.
I don't think we knew to what extent Dad was in a very dark place. I can still remember the morning before he died, him having come into my room and he closed the door and he just pleaded with me. He told me he had nobody left and that I was his last hope. My response to him was, Dad, I've got to get ready for school. I really wish that I'd just been that little bit older to understand.
It always feels like it happened yesterday, but he's getting further away.
You know, actually, he couldn't have left me with any greater gift than the children. As long as we stand together, we're okay.
I've been thinking about what actually mattered. The only important thing is being happy.
While you're clapping, tell you that Lucy's actually got a really busy weekend because tomorrow she's going to be at the BAFTAs. She's nominated for Outstanding Debut by a British writer, director or producer. So you should definitely go and watch the film. And yeah, Michael, tell us a bit about Beast.
So Beast is a psychological thriller set on Jersey, and it's about a young woman that's trapped in a very hostile family environment, and she meets a kind of outsider that she falls in love with, and he empowers her to escape, but he might be bad news. He's suspected of for a series of like brutal murders that are happening on the island. And this is, well, I don't have a trailer yet, this is a clip from the film, and it's a kind of moment where the lead character draws a line in the sand between her family and and this guy she's fallen in love with, and chooses to go with him.
Let's have a look.
I'd like to make a toast to my family for everything you've done for me. I forgive you. Get out. She'll wait here.
I guess I wanted to start by going right back to the very beginning, before these films existed, and just find out kind of what you were doing before you embarked on making your first features. Lucy, shall we start with you?
Yeah, sure. I before doing this, I had made documentaries for television, for broadcast television. I sort of started working as a researcher, about 15 years ago, I think, around that, and worked as a researcher, assistant producer, and did that, and then directed my first half-hour film for Channel 4. They have a strand called First Cuts in 2007, and then made various sort of bits and bobs for Channel 4 and the BBC. In fact, this project initially came about after meeting the family through a possible television project looking at autism in teenagers, because a number of the siblings were on the spectrum, but that didn't happen, and it was kind of through kind of meeting these really kind of interesting, incredible people that thought that there was certainly a film there. And it was initially, because my background's in sort of television, went to broadcasters, but there wasn't really any interest. So feeling like there was a film to be made, it kind of then evolved into being a feature documentary.
Daniel, how about you?
I didn't study film, I studied textiles, because I felt like I had to have a trade behind. I just wasn't interested in film when I was younger. And then I got I've done various jobs. I've worked at a Greyhound Stadium and worked in a theatre and did a lot of bar jobs and sold paintings, and eventually I studied MA in screenwriting, and then I made my first short film that did quite well, and then that got the attention of the UK Film Council, Vision and Media, and then it went from there, really.
When I was 16, I went to art school, and I wanted to be a painter, and then we did like different modules as you would at art school. Like you do a bit on photography and a bit on sculpture and and we did one on filmmaking, and everyone had to make a short, and I made a short that was really crap, but the teacher could see that I was interested in where the camera was, and then he gave me a bunch of VHS tapes that were like art house films from the 50s and 60s, and it's when I watched The Seven Samurai, and it kind of blew my mind. It was just the most profound sort of cinema experience I'd had, even if it was like a black and white film from the 50s, and it was 3 hours long, and it was, foreign language, and I just, within a week, I was like, oh, I want to do what that guy does. And so I came through quite a traditional route of did my degree in directing and made a bunch of shorts, and I did my postgrad in directing at the NFTS and did a bunch of shorts. Both of them were very practical courses because I wanted to make things, and then I just continued to make shorts until they got less crap, and then there was some qualities in there that I thought, at a certain stage I thought maybe I'm ready to make a feature, and I was developing feature over different feature ideas for several years, and so it's really from the shorts route. I've made a few adverts, but it's from narrative shorts that I've found my way.
And so did that kind of previous work, did you kind of use that as like a calling card for the pitching of the feature, your short films?
Yeah, and so much as there's the festival exposure of short films was really helpful, because because just from personal experience, going to short film festivals around the world, it meant my mind was opened up to all of the cinema that was being made by my peer group at the time. And I always thought at film school we shouldn't be just there's of course a bit of competition between each other, healthy competition about how good your short can be. But when I went to these film festivals and I just saw that some of these short films just blew my mind, I thought, I don't know, that's the competition. It's these it's some girl in Mexico City who's just made the best short film I've ever seen before, or some kid in the north of Finland, and it was the exposure of that was just it was before now you can see so many bits of work on things like Vimeo, but back then it was the only way to see films, and so that was one aspect of it that was helpful. And then I suppose if you win an award or you get into a prestigious film festival, then maybe certain people within the industry start to take notice, and it was but it was as much about the personal discovery as anything.
Yeah. Daniel, how about you with your shorts? Do you think that was a useful kind of starting point?
Yeah, I mean, practically speaking, of course, yeah. I don't necessarily think it helped with apostasy directly. It was I'd only made a few shorts with my own money, really, and then so I didn't feel like I was knew anybody in the industry, and that's what was great about iFeatures, is you could just apply, and as long as you had shorts that got into certain festivals, then that was it. So I learned it sort of on while going through iFeatures. What helped me is because I had a direct connection to the story. I grew up as a Jehovah's Witness, so for the iFeatures scheme I put together a documentary about my life, just using like photographs and narration, and that's ultimately what convinced the execs at the time that they should make this film.
Great. And Lucy, so your background is television directing, but how was it making the jump from pitching stuff to BBC, and then how easy was it to make that kind of jump to feature docs?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the process is incredibly different in that with television work you're kind of commissioned before you go out and shoot it, and this I pretty much shot it before we had our before our funding came in, so it was a kind of a whole new world for me. I mean, I did a short for the BFI prior to doing this, where I worked with the same editor and the same cinematographer, which was just for a luminous gala thing they did, but it was about an old lady in memory and things like that. And I think that was probably, although it's a very sort of different film, it was a chance to perhaps show what I could do with a tone that was sort of different to television necessarily. It was so I think that may have helped.
No, that's good. And then I wondered, so Daniel, that's really interesting about your kind of personal connection to the story, because I guess you had developed other ideas previously. So I guess I wanted to ask all of you maybe what you thought it was about this particular film that, that made it the one that ended up becoming your first feature. Did you, maybe anticipate that at the beginning, or
I'd put together maybe 4 or 5 feature scripts before Apostasy, just spec scripts, and I don't know about you guys, but I always felt like the one I was working on was the one at the time. But things sort of happen, or you realise somebody else is making a similar film, and but then I always had this idea in the back of my mind that I wanted to do something about growing up as in that religion and what happened to me with my family, but I was always scared of it, and I was worried about how my family would react and the community as well. But then eventually I just got older and decided to deal with it and felt like that was the right thing to do. And I knew I had an interesting perspective on it, that even if there was another film out there about that, then I knew mine would still have some value in some way.
Michael, how did you know Beast was the one?
Similar to Dan, I'd had maybe even like 8 or 10 other, they weren't full-fledged scripts, but ideas. So something from like a short treatment to some of them were scripts. And similarly it was like a personal connection to the Beast story. Not that I've murdered anyone or anything, but it's like I'm from Jersey, and it's loosely inspired from a true case where there was a guy that perpetuated a lot of crimes on the island, and he got away with it for 10 years, to the 1960s, but it had a sort of profound effect on the sort of collective. It was like a spectre that continued to haunt the island, and I had like very strong nightmares, and I was fascinated by this story. He became like the bogeyman in some ways, and it seemed a bit kind of big as a story, because it's there's murders and it's returning to the island, and I wanted to like explore my positive and negative impressions of the island growing up, and so I was trying to find more modest projects to be the first feature, that was set over like, I don't know, one day on the South Bank and 2 people make friends, so I came up with a few ideas like that, but I just over several years it became, the project just had a greater sort of magnetism for me and a fascination. And I realised, especially with your first feature, you're going to be doing it for sort of 5 years. It was 6, 7 years for me. It needs to be something that you're deeply fascinated by and passionate about. And so, in some ways, by virtue of it taking so long, all of the projects that I was kind of half into just fell by the wayside. And then that was the one that was sort of, yeah, it kind of retained that fascination. And maybe I'd grown up a bit and I'd made quite a few shorts that I felt confidence to tackle the subject in some way.
And Lucy, because you mentioned you didn't have your funding when you started, and then you were filming, was it was a number of years, right, that you were shooting. So what was it about this particular story that made you think it was kind of worth that level of investment without any funding?
Well, I think that because the initial kind of the initial ambition wasn't necessarily for it to be a feature, it was just to kind of create something with the family, and for around a year I was just going up and visiting them to see if there could be something there. I think that there was, in terms of the story in them, in my previous work, and even sort of going back to sort of teenage years, I've done a lot around mental illness, and that worked on documentaries in that area, and it's something that I was interested in or just sort of care about, particularly sort of stigma around mental illness. And I sort of met this family who openly, you know, were very open in talking about that, who didn't feel sort of shame and stigma around suicide, and there was kind of, I don't know, there was something kind of powerful and important that they were saying. So it was, it felt like a kind of an important story, and they had these sort of voices. But I think in terms of it being a feature, I think that it would have been very hard for it to, I understand why broadcasters weren't immediately interested, because often it's kind of, what's the story? I don't really know what the story was until the end. All it was this great space and these people who I knew, if I followed them, the way they thought and the way, you know, something interesting would happen, but the story is what happened at the end rather than the beginning. And so it was quite hard to sort of pitch in I'd say in television terms, this is about this is about that. It's just a kind of a sprawling family drama with lots of different voices and things. So it wasn't a very neat concept, and as much as it was sort of very sort of difficult and at times frustrating not to have the funding, ultimately I think it really let the film be what it was and gave me the sort of the time to explore it without, you know, pressure or being really accountable to anyone for that as well. And I mean, it's once I partnered up with Julia Nottingham, my producer at Pulse Films. She was the one who sort of said, like, have ambition, like you know, we can get this funded, and you know, and really kind of helped that, and you know, pushed the, you know, the vision and all of those sorts of things as well.
That's really good advice. I wanted to ask, actually, because there's a lot of filmmakers in our audience, so is anyone currently working on a feature or currently like have an idea that they're hoping to work on? Can you just do a show of hands? Okay, and so I wanted to ask you guys, just in really practical terms, for people who maybe have made a short or a few shorts, or like, what's the you know, and they have an idea, what's your main advice? What in a practical sense, what can they do? What should they do?
It's difficult with, like, sometimes, because each person's might have different advice for different people at different stages, but I'll keep, like, just on a very general level, I suppose. And I'm also coming from the shorts. There's no like one route into making a feature, as you'll see from like our 3 ways in. They're like quite different, and then there's like so many other various routes. So my take it or leave my advice. It's not like this is a way to do it, but I'd say certainly it really helps if you've made like a couple of shorts or several shorts, but certainly a couple that have done well at festivals or have done well in some kind of, you know, some sort of format, because it's really competitive out there. There's so many filmmakers. There's a certain amount of money to go out, and you can imagine if you're a financier, it's much easier to back a filmmaker if you can see evidence that they can tell really compelling narrative stories. And so I know friends that struggle to go in when they've made just music videos or just commercials, because the financier understandably goes, I don't know if this person can tell a story over, you know, 10 minutes or 15. How do I know that they're going to be able to tell a story over 100 minutes? And so I think as you tick away with those features, I think certainly it's very likely at some point before someone hands you over, you know, a bunch of money, that they're going to want to see some sort of evidence that you've smashed it in a short, like in a really big way. So that doesn't mean stop working on the feature. I just think just do that in parallel to developing shorts, and they could be like 5 minutes to half an hour, but the better that short is and the better it does sort of internationally or in any sort of recognition, the quicker your route is going to be to get financing. Whereas I've seen people write features and keep submitting, but I know it's going to be so hard for it to work because there's no evidence that they're offering up to people that this is what I can do. And so when you've got that, it makes it much easier. And in terms of developing feature, it just, I would say, have several ideas, as me and Dan were talking about in terms of narrative fiction. It's very rarely that one idea is going to work out. It's you learn from the other ideas that you're working on. And be prepared for it to be a long journey. Someone told me that it took on average 3 years to write a script, which completely terrified me, and I was like, there's no way it's going to take that long. And then it took me 7 years. So it's like it's writing a script that works, I think, is really, it's high altitude climbing, and there's going to be many moments where you get dizzy and lost and you don't know which way is right, and you get so many different types of feedback, and you really got to break through some like your own creative limitations like several times over for it to work. So just because something doesn't work immediately, don't abandon it, because maybe you can rework the idea or you can switch character, and it's a long journey. So.
Great advice. I mean, I'd also say get your ideas out there, talk to people, pitch your ideas to your friends and family, and just see because I mean, I found that I used to keep everything inside and not tell anyone anything, and then I would be surprised by the ideas that people would eventually respond to. They weren't necessarily the ones that I thought everybody would respond well to, and so I'd say that just try and collaborate or just get ideas out there. Practically speaking, I'd say try and just get in there with the financiers of the BFI and Creative England, whether that's just applying for their schemes or trying to apply for money for short films as well. I mean, it's just important to get yourself out there. Yeah.
On that, I would say, if you're serious about making shorts, whether that's fiction or documentary, like, be serious about it. I remember, like, at some point I had a spreadsheet of every date of every application for any short scheme that was coming up, and you know, whatever that is now, whatever the BFI has, and sometimes there's not many about some years, and sometimes there's a flourish of them. But I would kick myself if I missed an application, because that was just an opportunity I just threw away for the sake of just not putting something in the diary and saying, I'm going to make sure I make a film submission for, you know, whatever date. And it forced me to come up with ideas, because I knew April the 11th, you know, there's a Creative England doing a short submission, and I'd force myself to come up with an idea. Whereas if you always go, oh, some point in the future I'll make a short, it's going to take you so long. So it depends. You ask yourself how seriously you want to take it, and if you do want to make films, then you know, treat that enterprise like seriously, and you know, be geeky about it. And you got to, even if you're the creative, if you're the director, you've got to be your own producer in that way.
Yeah, I think one thing that it sort of helped me, and I guess it would apply to, you know, documentaries as well as fiction things, is and I think it helped with the funding, is we initially got a little bit of money from an organisation called Chicken and Egg, and they support female documentary makers, and we did these series of kind of workshops, and they were less about what the story was, but it was really about why you had to make it and why you wanted to make it, and it was really like digging deep on that, and I found what I sort of discovered quite surprising in terms of what I felt my connection was, and I think it sort of really focused my perspective, and then when it actually came to pitching and came to funding, that was something that they were really interested in. Not necessarily what's the story and what I'm going to see, why are you doing it, why do you, and it could be like just a connection to a scene or a moment that a character has, that, you know, or just something. It doesn't have to be as personal as Daniel's kind of connection there. It's sort of, it could be something that's not even really in the film, but I think that kind of really helped, and you know, really kind of would wed you as a filmmaker to the project, because often I find when you're going pitching, it might be that they don't actually want that story, but they're really now interested in you, or the way you think about the story, or something else that you kind of got there. So it's and that they perhaps, you know, want you to do something else, want you to come back again. So I think it's sort of thinking about, yeah, how you sort of demonstrate you as well. And the other thing, and I think perhaps this is slightly easier with documentaries, in that the majority of the film was self-shot, so the budget was, you don't really kind of need it. I was just borrowing a camera and filming myself, which may be harder, but we couldn't wait for funding. I mean, I'd met this family, and the youngest was 12 and the oldest was 22, and they were at this really interesting moment where they're about to kind of fly the nest and going through these throes of adolescence. I wasn't going to wait for 2 years for funding to happen. So I would say, don't wait. If you can, I wouldn't wait for permission or for someone to validate your project, to say this is a good idea, because people say that it's not for all sorts of reasons that you'll never know. You know, if you really care about it, just try and go and do it anyway. And even if it doesn't get funded or doesn't get shown, you're going to learn a whole lot. So rather than sort of sitting and waiting to someone to say that, this should be made.
I always saw, like, on that, like, it's so important to make things, because you have, like, everyone has a certain amount of mistakes in them.
Yeah.
And like, by making shorts, you kind of give, like, it's an exorcism of those mistakes. You get them out of your system. Like when I did a short and I didn't direct the actors very well, and it was just really bad. It hurt so much to see that on screen. I was just like, I'm never ever going to do that again. I'm never going to embarrass other people or myself in that way. So I became really studious about how to direct actors. And another time I did something that visually I just thought was like really whack, and I was just like, oh, this is so ugly. Why would anyone look at it? And then I just became like a student of, aesthetics and cinematography. But only those lessons only became like really visceral because I'd made something and saw the mistake and then promised myself. It's so abstract if you don't go through that process. It's theory, and then you can watch all the films in the world and have a great sort of parlance about the history of cinema. But just making it is a different thing. And so I just it's encourage you to like go out and make films, because to get those mistakes out of your system, and then when and recognise your mistakes and be honest about them. And then do a little promise to yourself about never making them again. And very quickly you see how short filmmakers can become, from within a handful of shorts, the level just like shoots up, because you can see how much they're learning from their own work.
I think we should talk about the essential topic of funding. So Lucy, you mentioned you got your funding after you've been shooting the project. So can you talk us through how and where and what was that process for you?
Yeah, so I started shooting in summer 2013, and we got I sort of teamed up the following autumn with Pulse Films, and they have a sort of a small fund of development money, and they enabled me to go up and shoot more intensively and get a decent-ish camera over a few weeks, with a view to getting more material to put together for a taster. Then it was Creative England who came on board the following spring, so this was 2015, with some a little pot of development money to put together an extended taster of kind of like 15-20 minutes, to understand the characters and story a little bit more. And then with that, we then kind of had a tour that we could go out for more significant funding. And it was then we went and pitched to the BFI in winter 2015. And we were asking for the BFI, Creative England, and Great Point Media, who are sort of investors, to come in 3 ways to enable us to cut the film and continue doing a bit more filming, which I kind of did on and off. And I mean, I mean, Julia, I don't know if she's here. The producer's here actually. She always, I mean, I was kind of, I will get frustrated saying, can't we just take like a bit of money now just to carry on? And she was, I mean, we were carrying on, but just doing it without any money. But she was, no, wait till we know we can finish this and we can get this sort of done. So we were kind of really holding on for a yes from the BFI, because we then knew that Creative England would come in and Great Point would come in, but they wouldn't come in unless the other one would come in. And so once we had that, we know we could, go full steam ahead and we could finish the film. And then we got little bits from Tribeca and also from Sundance as well to help with other things. And then Netflix, it was a Netflix film, but they didn't come on until we pretty much finished the edit. Then we just had 6 weeks more after they came on, and we sort of talked about other things we were going to do with the film. But they gave them, essentially the money to finish it because we'd run out.
Daniel, how about you?
Mine was a bit easier than that. I just applied to iFeatures. Yeah, but that's a self-contained scheme, and that's money from the BBC, BFI, and Creative England, and Green Point Media as well. I applied, I think it was the end of 2014, the beginning of 2014. So it's taken that long to make the film and get it out there. So yeah.
It's not easy though. He's being modest. It's really competitive, and they're like, no, could only accept like how many on it, and then.
Well, it's different. They've just opened a new round of funding for iFeatures, but when I went through it, it went down to 16. They had like 1,000 applicants. It went down to 16, and then to 8, and then 5, and eventually they chose the ones to finance. So it was trickier to get through those hoops.
What do you think? What's your advice to people that are just about to do that? Do you think? What did you learn from that process? Maybe that.
I think what Lucy said before is key. Knowing why you want to make it, because I've seen people in iFeatures not get through and stumble over that question when the financiers ask why you, because you've got to really convince them that you're the one to tell this story, because you've got no way to prove it really. And that's how they do it. They just say to you, why you? Why do you want to make this film? And you need to have a really strong answer for that. And maybe trying to prove it in other ways than just talking. I think that's was the key to why I got through. I realised I had to do something to really get across my connection to the story, and that's why I went away and made a documentary about it. And I showed that at my pitch meeting. And it had a visceral response, and they were moved by it, and I could have never got that across in words, and that's what did it for me.
So I had a sketch of an idea, maybe like maybe it was like a 5-page treatment, and I was looking for a producer, and I met the guys at Agile Films, who are like a commercial production company, and they've got a sort of feature development arm, and then we worked together on they sort of funded the development of that script, which took like a couple of years. And during that time, I also applied to the Torino Film Lab, which is like an international development lab. It is worth looking at if you're. I would recommend researching any development lab. Sundance has got the Writers Lab, Torino Film Lab's one. There's a few others, and they're great because you get really great script editors helping you sort of dig deeper into the script. And once we'd had the script to a certain place where we felt we knew the kind of film that we were making, we applied to the BFI for production funding, but they didn't feel the script was quite there. So I think rightly they kind of gave us a bit more development funding, and then it was maybe another 8 months before, and then they kind of came on board, and then we went. During this whole time I was talking to Film 4, because they'd seen a few of my shorts and they were curious what I was going to be doing with the first feature, and that was more of an extended courtship. It wasn't like, in some ways the funding for the feature was quite simple in that it was BFI and Film 4, but it was a conversation that went over 18 months, say, before they kind of greenlit the project. It wasn't just like an application, an interview, stamp, we'll give you some money. And through both of those, with the BFI I'd made a short with, and with, as I said, with Film 4, they'd got me in for meetings, having seen a couple of my shorts. And so, going back to one of your original questions of like how to first get in there, or what's helpful routes, like it was really the shorts created that wedge into the door. And it must have, a dozen times I must have gone into Film 4 when they just asked, what are you interested, what do you want to do for your first feature, or tell us a bit about the ideas that you're working on. It's not like you just walk through the door and slap a script on the table and say this one. I mean, you can when you're really established, but at the beginning it's them getting to know you and getting to know what the kind of voice that is coming through your shorts and what kind of stories that you want to tell. And yeah, the shorts were really helpful in that. And but it was quite a long development process with all of those entities, with Agile Films, with Ivana McKinnon and Laura Dark, which are two other producers that came on board, and again imbued the project with with so much of their own creativity. And BFI, the Torino Film Lab, Film 4, was like 5 stages, 5 groups of people that were kind of asking tough questions about the script and forcing me to elevate it.
And then, so once you'd actually got the green light and you'd been through that development process, and you're actually, on set and making the thing, did you approach that in a different way to your experience with making the shorts?
Not really, because it's still the same thing in some way. Like I'd made one short that was kind of big budget, it wasn't big budget, but it was like 50 grand. So it was the first time I think we'd painted some sets and created some. So it didn't feel like radically different. It was more the stamina of shooting for 5 weeks, and you end up still working for like 7 days a week and not sleeping much, and you only get a certain amount of time to prep. That it's really, I found stamina quite the tough thing. By the end, you're quite frayed around the edges, and you go into like a strange sort of space. But the helpful thing was, having worked on the script for so many years, I kind of knew it inside out. And so when we were on set and we didn't have the time to do this very elaborate shot that we'd planned, and 3 hours became 30 minutes, I'd worked with my collaborators, my HODs at film school. We could improvise quite quickly because I knew what the story's about. I had very strong relationships with my collaborators, and so actually developing something for so long, it kind of paid dividends when you're on set and your back's against the wall and you have to throw all of your ideas out and make kind of gut choices in the moment. That was something that I hadn't done with shorts, because I'd written them maybe over a 6-month period and then shot them.
Daniel and Michael, I wanted to ask you, because I think in both films the performances are just so incredible, and I just wanted to ask a bit more about how you worked with your actors, and what that was like, because I guess, yeah, in both cases it was kind of working with people over a much longer period than you had previously been used to.
Yeah, I mean, because it was iFeatures, I didn't have much of a pressure in terms of casting. So that, I don't know about you, Michael, but yeah, I was quite free to just look at whoever I wanted. There was no like commercial pressure there, so I made a point of just casting people from the northwest of Manchester, because I felt like they needed to understand the place and the rhythm of the dialogue and language, and because I had so much else to explain about what it was like to be a Jehovah's Witness. So and plus I just love actors, working actors, and we've got so much talent in Manchester, and they don't get given that many film opportunities, so it was just great to work with people like Siobhan and Molly and Sasha. And then I did fight for rehearsal time, so I managed to get a week of informal rehearsals where we just sat around and talked about the script, and I tried to explain what was going on, because it was quite hard for the actors to really understand why these people would do these sort of things, so I had to explain that and the sort of cognitive dissonance that exists between people who believe in a god and versus the family. So there was a lot of that, sort of just talking about that heavy stuff on set as well. Like occasionally the actors would sort of forget what was really going on inside the minds of these characters, so it was more that, just reminding why they do these things.
Michael?
Yeah, I was thinking about, I was talking to someone about this before, that people can sometimes have a misconception that if you're a director, you're a kind of acting coach, and it's a misconception about the job, and in some ways maybe you have to do that if it's with a non-actor, or you're trying to help get the actor to a place of naturalism, but really it's about finding the character and collaborating to create a character with an actor. And I was just thinking, actually, you get so many, I thought about this just before the shoot, like how many stages you get to create that character with an actor, because really you're directing the actor when you're writing the script. Like if you write very naturalistic dialogue, or it doesn't have to be naturalistic, if you write just good dialogue that's got depth to it and nuance and subtext, it's so much easier to get a good performance then. And it's very hard even for the best actor to act material like bad material in a sort of natural way. It's really good actors can do it, but it just makes the job much more difficult. So even when you're writing your scenes and you're trying to find some truth to them, if you really crack that and you find something interesting and that's got that depth and nuance, and it's going to make your job on set so much easier. And for the actor, you've also got all of the prep time. So we only had a bit of rehearsal time. I think we had like 2 or 3 days, but I'd cast Jesse and Johnny, who are the 2 leads, 6 months, maybe it was a bit less for Johnny, or maybe 4 months for him. And we could have conversations, and we'd share movies, and we'd Skype each other and share books, and we were tuning into each other's creative frequency. And so that was another element, that we were just sort of getting on the same wavelength. And then we had rehearsals, and it meant that on the day, I don't know if you've got time, unless you're David Fincher, to have like long conversations on set about your character's motivation. You've got to, it's almost, you need the time before that to sort of flush those questions out and to sort of explore all of those variations. And it's more about execution when you're on set. It doesn't mean that you can't go deep where necessary, but it's not like you've really got the time to sort of pontificate on a character's backstory. I wrote a 5-page backstory for each of the characters and gave it to the actors before, and we talked about that and actually changed it, and they came back to me with questions, so that on the day we were more calibrating and modulating, and then of course you're directing actors in the edit. Like if you're, as much as it's the actors, it's in some ways the actors there, and they're exposed, and it's their talent that's going to make the part come alive. I still think it's your responsibility as the director for the quality of the performance. If something doesn't come off well on screen, I think it's your fault as a director, because you could have edited that out. And so with your editor, you're continuing to direct the actors, and you're sculpting that performance. And the amount of ways that you can reconfigure a scene to make it work performance-wise if the performance wasn't there on the day. You know, the amount of tricks that we've used in an edit to get something, the most meaningful shot on a film, when it could have just, I think, you know, it was a shot where the actor just thought that we weren't rolling and they were just flicking through their phone, and we've used that. You know, and a good editor is going to be your ally in sort of finding that performance. But I just thought, yeah, it's interesting to think about the broad spectrum of how you direct actors. It isn't just like, yeah, on set.
I'd say make it very clear the way you work as a director to your actors before you start production as well. Just in case you have any sort of unconventional ways of working, that they're aware of that, so it doesn't become an issue on set.
What's your unconventional?
I'm not going to say, but yeah, make that clear. But then as you get, I mean, the difference between features and shorts is that you develop a shorthand as you go on. You know, by the second and third week, you actors you understand each other, and things just become easier in a way, and you start to trust each other, and it becomes you trust your own instincts as a director as well.
Lucy, you obviously don't have the benefit of a script and actors, and it's really about access to people and people allowing you in to tell their stories. And I just, especially in a film like this where it's like a highly sensitive time in people's lives and it's such an intimate film, how do you go about like building that relationship with people and then maintaining it for such a long time?
Well, I think it's I mean it's just like, it's kind of like any relationship really, and I mean it sort of grew over time. I mean, the family are very open and they're very warm, and they were very kind of welcoming to me, and I think yeah, I mean sort of trust kind of slowly develops. I mean, I think it's difficult because everybody will find their own ways of directing and what they're comfortable with as well, and may have a need to would like things to be a bit more sort of structured than I do. I mean, I work in a way that I mean, because it was just me and the camera, that does create a sort of an intimacy there as well. It's always sort of led by them. I don't sort of set things up. I mean, one of the things about the film is, I mean, the family have a very sort of strong retrospective story that could have led the film, but I always wanted it to be set in the present, and that's where I've met these sort of people and kind of become sort of fascinated and sort of cared for them. So it's always sort of the present day scenes that are leading us back to kind of the past, and there's lots of things that aren't in the film because they just didn't like come up through that. So it's kind of led by them. Even our conversations are kind of slightly more led by them. I mean, there might be things that I'm interested in, but I might wait a month to ask a question, depending on if it felt right or if something was going on in their lives at that moment that made that pertinent then. And I was interested when there's sort of lots of reflections on their father, and who is a presence, but it's also an absence as well. So you're kind of interested in when they're getting on with things not kind of being like that. But also with the family, it was always, I mean, there's a difference between what you film and what you use and what you broadcast, and there's always an agreement that anything that I shoot that you don't want to be in the film doesn't have to be in the film, and that is how I prefer to work and have done before. I mean, it's very intimate, very personal. They live with this film, and you never forget that, and the responsibility of that, of what they're giving you. But that enables, once that's understood, that enables people to perhaps not veto themselves sort of in the present, that, oh goodness, is that going to be used? They could always say to me, oh, don't use this, but sometimes it's, you know, we filmed over a long period of time, and there are moments where they're sort of intensely kind of vulnerable, and it's sort of difficult. And it's only sort of 6 months or a year later that there's a rise out of that, or, you know, there's a sort of a moment of sort of strength that kind of casts a different light on that makes that so important. And so you can't always sort of tell, but if you don't shoot it, you don't kind of have the option. So, and they understood, you know, that as well, that, you know, to understand those moments, the tough times would need to be there too. Yeah, and they never said not to film, and there was like one thing that they didn't want in there, but it wasn't of any sort of substance. So it's sort of, I think, kind of, you know, if you know people and you're kind of sensitive to them as well, and you keep talking. I mean, they watched a lot of cuts of the film too, but yeah, I mean, that depends. Some people are less. I mean, when for television broadcasters, you can't always do that, because they, you know, they don't want you. It's not giving. It's not giving editorial control. It's just about, you know, a sort of, you know, respecting the kind of sensitivity of it as well. Yeah.
Great. Okay, and then I wanted to move maybe to, like, once you have your finished film, so fast forwarding quite quickly there, but so Lucy, you were premiered in London, and Michael and Daniel in Toronto. What is the process to get your film seen, and yeah, how did that happen for you? Was Toronto the place that you really wanted it to world premiere, or how did that kind of come about?
Yeah, it was somewhere. It was on the list of, like, maybe there was 3 festivals around the time that we'd finished that I'd be really happy for the film to premiere at, and we'd finished the film in like end of May, beginning of June, but we did apply to Cannes because I really thought Directors Fortnight would be a great place for it, and we were in the running up until whatever the last day of the announcement, and we really thought collectively we're in Cannes, and I could kind of taste the overpriced rosé, and I was like, I can see we're going to be there, and then we didn't get in, and it was killer. That week was just like it felt really heartbreaking. I mean, like any time, even when I had a lot of shorts I'd sent to festivals, when I didn't get in, I mean, you get way more rejection letters than you do get acceptance letters, and that's just like that's part of it. And then the next one that felt right for the audience that we're going for was Toronto, and I'd had a friend that premiered his film the year before called Lady Macbeth, and the director's Will Oldroyd, and he was telling me about how this section in Toronto platform was an even better, it gave his film even better exposure, and I think it was true, and you know, in Toronto was a better place for the film than Cannes, but in the moment when I had that news, when I had that email, I was just, all the blood drained from my face, and I was just like, what? You know, and then it's like, and then through the year you get into, you know, we've been on a festival run and similar, and one of us gets into one festival and not the other, and you kind of begin to roll with the punches a bit more. But at the beginning, it's like, it feels like very high stakes. But in terms of application, I had a sales agent who were the kind of intermediary between the distributor, the person like buying your film, which could be in the States A24 or Fox Searchlight, or you know, or in the UK, you know, Altitude or Curzon, or it could be Netflix, or and they're the person that negotiates that deal. And you don't always have to have them, but it's often the person that's, if you do have that sales agent, they're sort of brokering that deal, and they're the person that's putting it out to festivals. But if you're doing it in terms of in shorts, you don't really get sales agents, so it's going to be, you know, you guys doing the submissions.
Yeah, we finished the film just before Toronto, so it just was the right time. I was hoping to, and there was Venice as well, but we didn't get into Venice. Well, they had a film there last year that was the same subject matter, so
really?
they said that was one of the real reasons. So, but then I did want to have a sort of more artistic festival, so then I was pushing for San Sebastian, which is a great smaller festival. And luckily we got into there, so we did Toronto and then San Sebastian.
And I get jealousy because we didn't get into San Sebastian, and I saw like Apostasy did in some others. I was like, I can't believe it. And it's
You're doing all right. You're going to Sundance as well, so
Rival.
you're all right. Yeah, and then it was the same thing. Yeah, we'd run out of money by that point, so we couldn't even like set up a screening to show it to sales agents. So the BFI helped us out there and set that up for us, and then we got a sales agent. And then they sort of took over from there. A British Council have been helping a lot because they set up screenings and invite festival programmers over. So there was a lot of that going on. But it's kind of, as a director, it's out of your hands at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we applied to lots of festivals and got lots of no's, didn't get into Sundance or Tribeca or Toronto or lots of different ones. And I think that, I mean, London Film Festival was great, and it's the perfect sort of fit in the end. I mean, it's quite, I wouldn't say it's a small film, but it's kind of quite domestic and it's quite sort of intimate, and we were really looked after here. And I think that, I mean, that's something too, because I think it's quite easy to kind of get all in like Sundance fever, and like that's the place that you've got to, and then you do have these crushing disappointments, and of course you should aim for those things, but there are lots of great also smaller festivals, and you don't necessarily want to premiere somewhere where you're going to get lost, and the and the film's necessarily not going to get the attention. So I'd sort of like look at a lot of different sort of festivals as well, so you can manage that. But yeah, London was sort of great for us as well, and I gave birth 4 days before the premiere, so I could actually be there, whereas anywhere else I was going to have to get like a boat to America or something because I couldn't fly. It was just it would be really silly. So and I think it's interesting with the Netflix thing, because you don't sort of tour around with the film at festivals and things like that, because obviously it's the platform is Netflix, so they support you and want you to have a good launch at a festival. But I mean, it's it premiered on the Saturday, the next Friday it was available on Netflix, so and that was it. And that's been, it's been the best thing for the film, because I think one thing that I wanted and that the family wanted as well is for people to see it, and also for young people to see it. And they don't go to festivals, nor do they go to the cinema. So, but they do watch Netflix. And so it was the best kind of place kind of for it. So it was kind of fine not to have that kind of run of festivals, but yeah.
I really want to come to your questions. I've just got one more, so have a think, and we'll get a mic coming to you in a second. I was just really interested about being reviewed, because I guess if you haven't had a feature before, maybe you haven't been through that. What's that like as a director? Did you read everything that was written about your films? And
I found it so terrifying because we premiered, maybe you guys had the same, when we premiered at Toronto. They've had press screenings like a few days leading up to that, so they've written their reviews, and then literally the second the credits come up, and you're sitting with however many hundreds of people or whatever watching your screening, which is horrific enough, because you're so hypercritical of everything on screen with that many eyes on it. But also, a phenomenal experience. Everyone that it's great to go through. But as soon as the credits are up, then the reviews are kind of released, or they were, for our film, and then I could see out the corner of my eye my producers going online to check the reviews, and I was just like, I don't know. And I had to go on stage and do a Q&A, and that night we had like a dinner, and we went out, and I just didn't want to look at them, because I've seen films that I love get torn to shreds by review, and I just cannot understand. I'm like, this is a great film. And of course, films that I watch, I'm just like, this is shit. Why? And then people are just praising it because it's, I don't know, and like we all have particular tastes, but so there's no guarantees that can go well. Mercifully, most of our reviews were quite supportive of the film, and there was a couple that really got like, oh, that's, I was really pleased that they picked up on like really specific things. So but my heart was, I don't know how you can not be invested, because it does change its industry perception of you, and if it goes badly, it's never impossible. And there's so many great instances of people coming back from a film that wasn't well received, and everyone makes a bad film, and so everyone's going to have that experience. But I was thankful that the first movie out it was kind of a soft landing.
Yeah.
I think it was tricky for us at Toronto. I mean, we didn't get any reviews. I think that was worse than getting a bad review. We had a premiere at Toronto, and it was packed, and then we didn't get a single review. And it turns out all the reviewers, the big reviewers, were at the Shia LaBeouf film reviewing that, and then it turned out that they were all going to wait for San Sebastian for it and to review it there, because they felt like it would be a better place to watch the film. And it was, and I sort of knew that anyway, that it was the right environment, the right kind of festival to get good reviews, and that's what happened. It was at San Sebastian we started to get the reviews through, and it was nerve-wracking, but luckily people were nice to us. Peter Bradshaw came in. He asked for a link, but we wouldn't give it to him, so we made him watch it at San Sebastian, and he gave us a good review, 4 stars.
Yes.
I mean, similarly, kind of nerve-wracking also, because it's sort of, you spend so much time on these things, and with your editor and with your producer, you're kind of aware that you're in this sort of bubble, and you hope that you're getting across the things that you want to, or things are going to be picked up on, but you sort of fear that you're kind of making this in a kind of vacuum, and we did like a test screening with an audience, and they sort of filled in a form, so that gave a sort of sense of what was being sort of picked up, but that was more for things that would be understood. So it was really, really nerve-wracking. I mean, for me, really nerve-wracking for the family too, because they're putting their lives out there, and they're going to have that strange experience where people are talking about them as if they're fictional characters, and it's their life. But they've been really kind of supportive, and like some really wonderful ones where you are pleased that they picked up picking up things that you weren't even intentional as well in it, that just different ways of seeing. I think it's been what's been interesting as well is being out on Netflix, we daily get comments in from people who've seen it, or they write to the family, or they to you that I've been through this experience, this helped me understand that, or for this or for that, and that's been kind of great having that response too. But also the reviews, it is ultimately just so personal. I mean, this is a film about family, and very universal for that reason. I mean, even when we were getting notes from execs or things, and even with reviews, you could read them and you kind of think like, okay, their parents are probably divorced, or they've got loads of siblings, or they've got everything. Everyone's bringing themselves to it as well, and it is just their opinion, so they're going to see different things in it, and different things are going to resonate. Like nothing is like the truth of what your film is. But, you know, be that good, bad, or anything in between. It's just someone's opinion. So
yeah, audience reaction is another big thing. Yeah, that could be. For the most part, we've had like good questions and good reactions, but you never. I've certainly been in Q&As where it's gone a bit. You know, I actually remember someone telling me about a Q&A. I don't know whether you had it in Toronto or maybe in London. That was quite tough. And there were some Jehovah's Witnesses in the audience, and it was like I mean, maybe you could speak about it better.
That's at every Q&A, yeah.
But the one that I went to in London, and I thought, oh, you know, is this going to be tough as well? It was so many ex-Jehovah's Witnesses that were talking about how sort of how much your film resonated with them. It's actually really moving to be in the audience because there were so many people there. Just like every person just said, "I've lived through this experience. Thank you so much for watching." So it's funny how. I mean, I don't know exactly what happened at one of the Q&As that was tough, but that you can have reactions that are hot and cold, and then you're like, you can go from I'm sure the tough one must have been like, ugh, and then another one, you're like, oh my god, it really connects with people.
No, you can. It depends how provocative your film is, yeah. But I was getting it from all sides, and you sort of learn to just swat those away. You get people who say, this is a wasted opportunity. Why did you not attack this religion more? And but then you get people who say, oh, well, how can you be so cruel to this religion? And it's like, fucking hell, okay. Why don't you go and make a film about it? Yeah.
Have we got any questions from the floor? We've got a mic coming, so just hold on.
Thanks. Yeah. So it's kind of a mixed question. So you are from Jersey, and I was wondering, do you know Bissell Thomas?
Who, sorry?
Helier Bissell Thomas?
No.
He's another director from Jersey. And he.
What parish is he from?
Oh, God. St. Lawrence or something like that?
No, I don't mix with those people. West Coast.
Well, anyways, the thing is, he. Of course, being in Jersey, it's like. There isn't like a big world of filmmakers right there. It's like coming out right now, actually. And so he went to Manchester to study there direction. And I was wondering how or when did you decide to move to, for example, London to study or to make the courses at the NFTS?
Yeah, when it was 18, because there's no university on Jersey, it's quite a small island. There's like 100,000 people there, and so just if you want to do further education, you've got to you've got to go to the UK. Well, you don't have to go to the UK, but you've got to leave Jersey. So I actually went to Bournemouth to do my degree in directing because they had a practical course where you could specialise in directing or cinematography or editing, and I knew I wanted to find a course where you could specialise. So I went when I was 18, and it didn't seem like there was anyone making films in Jersey. There was me and like two mates, and we'd like watch a couple of movies and convince each other to act in our crap shorts. And now when I go back and I meet some young filmmakers, it seems like everyone wants to be a director, which is great. And they got so many more resources. We had like one bulky VHS camera that we had to like borrow from the art school, whereas now you can shoot so much on a DSLR or something. But yeah, it was when I was about 18.
And how was it like filming in an island where, I mean, they used to film back in like 70s, 80s series over there because it was yeah. And so how was it filming over there, this feature film?
We couldn't actually afford to shoot the whole film there because it exists outside the UK tax bracket. So if you shoot in the UK, you get a certain percentage of your budget back if you spend here to incentivize filmmaking. And when we found that out, it was really heartbreaking because I'd written every scene with a specific location in mind, like those woods, where I were near my house, and I thought they were a very evocative, enchanting location, and this bar because this has got great texture. And then when we found out we could only do a week there, I was just like, how is this ever gonna feel like a Jersey location? And so, but then that happens on big movies. You've got to shoot in Manchester to be New York in the 19th century because it's got a couple of streets that are retain the architecture or whatever the example. So we did 4 weeks on the London-Surrey border because it's got a similar level of affluence and we could crew up easier here. But we scouted Wales, Northern Ireland, Yorkshire. So we did 4 weeks for the main interiors, and then we did 1 week in Jersey for the main exteriors. So, and that was, yeah, it was good because I knew the landscape quite well, so I could, yeah. But it doesn't have any like production, or very limited production facilities.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's tough to shoot that.
And did you bring the crew from?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Great. Thanks.
No worries.
Any other questions? Yeah, just behind.
Yeah, so my question was, once your movie is released, and I was wondering what happens if your movie doesn't surpass the budget or the predictions that the production wants. Like, do you have to pay them back, the production, like if situations like that happen? And also, do you think criticism today affects movies from reaching the predicted box office budget that all productions are aiming to get?
Really hope they don't ask for money back.
Oh, they don't, yeah, because I was completely worried about that.
No, they don't. It's not. No, you're not. I don't.
No.
I'm gonna check my contract, but I don't think you're like. You've sold the film to a distributor, and they've bought it, so they're taking on the risk, and that's part of the sales agreement. That they're like, we'll buy your film for this much, or we want you to pay $1 million, but we only think it's worth 600,000 because. Or whatever the conversations are, then it's them that own the rights to the film within that territory, and you've maybe sold it to a French distributor who are going to, and a UK distributor. And so, yeah, I think if it doesn't do well, it can hurt you a bit in terms of your, I don't know, in terms of whether you are a bankable filmmaker. But I think for your first movie, in a way, if it doesn't do well, that's okay because people are looking to help build your voice. So I think when you...
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I feel like it's changing these days that, yeah, you don't have to necessarily make loads of money at the box office, especially if you've got, if you're in there with the BFI and BBC, they will... I feel like they're making an effort now to support filmmakers more, to make second and third films, so...
Actually, that leads me really nicely into a question for you, Daniel, because maybe you could tell us about the IWC bursary. Which is an initiative run at the London Film Festival by the BFI, which is a £50,000 bursary given to a first or second time British director to support them in their next project. And so both of you were shortlisted, right? And then Daniel won at the 2017. Sorry.
It's good. You're bringing the memories back.
But, so, Daniel, could you tell us just about how you're using that bursary and what's coming up? Or you don't have to go into how you're spending it, but...
I've only just received it, so... no, it's... Again, I think it's because of this. There was a shocking stat that came out a couple of years ago about how it was like 85% of first-timers didn't get to make a second film. So I think there was an effort then to support filmmakers to make a second film, and the IWC is one of the sponsors of the London Film Festival, set up this bursary award to give people time and space and to research and develop their second film, because otherwise you might feel a pressure to get out there and find the finance and react quickly, but it's, I've got a little bit more space and time now to work on it.
Are there any other questions? Yeah, just...
Hi, again just on the distribution side of things, quite interesting, yours is a Netflix original film, but it was only 6 weeks before the end that they got involved. When do you pick up the phone and talk to those distribution people? Is it during production? Obviously with you it was during production, and how much did that dictate the decisions? And I guess for the Fiction Boys similarly, what do you think about distribution when you're writing the script, and maybe include some more elements that could make it more distributable?
Yeah, in the case of Kingdom of Us, and we had Dogwolf as the sort of sales agent there, and they came on board like long before Netflix did, and they facilitated the conversation with Netflix, and we were sort of deep in the edit then, and we just met up with them and talked at quite considerable length about the film, and then they took the film before they'd even seen a cut, which was quite nerve-wracking, because I thought, why don't you just watch it and then you can see if you but that's the way they like to do things sometimes, and Dogwood were very like, no, just get it to the place where you're really happy with it, and you know, I hate using the word like defend the film, but you know, essentially defend the film, and where you're at before sending it to them. So they then watched it, and we had a sort of 6 weeks in the edit. Netflix also, one of the things that we were looking for an editor to sort of finish the film and to come in with a fresh pair of eyes. So we'd taken a pause, and they like to have sort of approval of who that editor is as well. Then, and I was really nervous about Netflix, and before anything was sort of signed or we wanted to do that, I kind of wanted to understand, you know, to me it was like, is this just like a big, you know, beast, and what do they want to change, what control do they have? You know, we'd spent so long making the film and doing it, you know, I hope with a lot of sensitivity, that they're going to just bulldoze their way through it. So we sat down with them for a good sort of 3-4 hours going through it, and I mean, I kind of came into the room almost like a sort of, you know, a lioness protecting my cubs with my claws out, ready to sort of like and then soon was sort of like, oh, they're actually really lovely, and they don't want me to do anything I don't want to do, and they were incredibly supportive, just really wanted to kind of, you know, where it was needed, help you kind of push your vision more. Any scene, it was just like, talk through what you're trying to do there, okay, do that more, do that better. They weren't, I mean, they really got it, and actually I feel like they had some steers and influences that made the film truer to what I wanted it to be as well, and were very, you know, pretty hands off. You have, I mean, it depends what agreement you have, but they were allowed to give a certain number of rounds of notes, and then kind of that was it. But they, yeah, they didn't dictate anything. They were kind of good. So it was a very, very positive experience, and that has been since with them as well. They really look after you.
I think for me, I didn't really care too much about whether or not we could distribute the film. I was just trying to tell an honest, truthful story. I guess maybe when I was casting, I was conscious of who I was casting, and you know, Siobhan Finneran's well known in the TV world, and those sort of things came into play maybe. But I didn't really care. I mean, luckily for the film, we discovered that there was a huge niche community of ex-Jehovah's Witnesses and people who were interested in religious subjects, and we didn't realise. Like, we set up a Facebook page for the film, and like within a couple of weeks we had a few thousand followers, and I think that something was going on in that community as well, where they were really pushing, and we get so many messages every day from people who want to see the film, and so that's fed into an online deal that we're sorting out at the minute with Amazon. And so, I mean, that's turned out to be quite interesting, because they want to put the film out now as soon as possible, because they're getting a lot of people getting in touch asking to see it, and so we're trying to work out when to release it in cinemas versus Amazon.
So, because it is coming out in cinemas right later this year,
yeah,
but it's still TBC.
Yeah.
When?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And
yeah, I suppose similarly, I didn't think of like, oh, we have to put this in because it's going to make it more, you know, distributor friendly. I think maybe with the first feature, if you're too sort of like cynically minded about, I want this to, you know, to sell to this many territories, or I want X amount of people to see it, you're going to risk missing the opportunity to sort of find your own voice. Like, there's plenty of time to sort of make films that grow and expand, and you can make the canvas bigger, but it's really important to like make something authentic. I don't think it's a bad question to ask yourself as a filmmaker though, because it's so hard to get people into the cinema these days. There's so much great TV about, and video games, or whatever. It's such a bigger market. So many films being made. It doesn't. It's a question I ask myself now as I'm reading material. It's like, why would someone come and see this film? I do think, like, prospectively, what's in the trailer? What is the... And sometimes I've looked at material, I thought, I can't see that as a theatrical film. I think it's going to be too difficult, or it's going to limit the budget range, and I've actually moved projects aside. I mean, I'm sure if I fall in love with something so profoundly, it would sort of neutralise those questions, but I do have that hat on now, and it's... yeah, and I don't know, the game seems to change like so rapidly. I can't keep up, like, to the guy's question before, which we didn't touch on, about reviews. That obviously, if you've got a big tentpole movie and the IP is so popular, they're bulletproof. I find it mad that you can get, I don't know, whatever Marvel film, and it's unanimously, everyone just says it's 1 star, it's a load of crap, but it will make a ton of money because the IP, the brand of that is so powerful. On the flip side of the scale, when you're making low budget films, like ours, and which most first films will be, you're really kind of dependent on reviews, because it's really hard to get people to come in to see a film that's like got the 2-star review, or like it's just 3 stars all the way. So you are really dependent on that. And even from just a few years ago, where stars used to mean something, you can have Jennifer Lawrence on your poster, and it doesn't guarantee that people are going to go and see your movie anymore. Mother lost a lot of money. Who knows? Maybe it makes it back again some weird way. But it was deemed as a failure. I find that it's not a perfect film, but I found that quite scary, because studios are taking less and less risks, and that's probably just going to make that studio, Paramount, go, okay, we're not going to fund creative, crazy projects anymore. We'll just stick to the Marvel thing. And I don't know, it becomes a perpetual cycle where it's guaranteed to make money because teenagers like Marvel or whatever the latest brand is, and filmmakers, Aronofsky's made some great films and some not so great films, but it's I find that it's tricky, and that game I think is only going to get that much harder. So I think it's going to be really difficult for filmmakers to sustain a whole career and not be engaged with that question at all, and just be in some kind of creative, artistic silo just against the world. I think you can do that, but then you're going to work at a very particular budget level for the whole of your career, which is right for some filmmakers. But if you want to expand the canvas, I think you've got to think about, why is someone going to pay 13 quid to go and to see the movie.
I'm afraid, I'm really sorry, but we've run out of time. I'm gonna just ask, just to wrap up, maybe you could just share the advice that you wish you'd been given when you started out making your first feature, that you could share with anyone.
Oh, it's difficult because it just is like I didn't know I was making a feature for a very long time. So when I started doing it, I didn't really know what I was doing at all. But it just echoes what I kind of said before. I would say, just get on with it. Like, I would say, don't wait for necessarily permission or validation. If you believe in it, then plow ahead. But I would say also, and it's something that I've learned through working with my producer more. Be patient and wait for the right time before you only really, if you're going and doing a pitch thing, you've really got one chance at doing that. Make sure you're ready, you know what your story is, why you want to make it, I wouldn't rush that. I don't think, I would just sort of wait till you can fully go there and do it, because otherwise you might get a rejection and then drop something that had real potential with a bit more time.
I would say it's learn to fake confidence, because you might not know the answers to things, and it's okay if you don't know what decision to make. You just got to pretend that you do, because you're the leader. So if you struggle with confidence or anything like that, just learn how to fake it.
I think it's good. But I always think, I don't know, a sick feeling in my stomach if I turn up to set and I see all the trucks and everyone looks like they know what they're doing, and they've got clipboards and high vis and walkie-talkies. I'm like, oh my god, I have no idea what I'm doing, and you're supposed to know as the director. But in a way, it's true in so much as, yeah, you can have all these professional people, and you can like get all the shots you're supposed to do through the day, and and everyone can feel really good about themselves. Everyone's really professional, and they know all the lingo. But in a way, who cares if what happens in that sort of frame between the word action and cut isn't interesting? And I've definitely been on sets with filmmaker friends who are a bit more like haphazard, or they're not as sort of professional or slick, but their passion and the uniqueness of their viewpoint is so specific to them that their films turn out so much better, even if they didn't sort of say the right thing or act in the right way. So I think it definitely helps that, but it's also, who cares if some of the crew don't quite trust in you, because whatever, you've got to concentrate on what happens in that box if you're the filmmaker, and it's just, you've got to make that as interesting as possible. And I'm just trying to think of the advice that I got that I tried to abide by, was a teacher who said, just watch a lot of films. It's amazing how much, when you watch them, you will be able to figure out how they're done. And I was always surprised at film school how many students weren't interested in cinema, and my gut feeling was like, I don't think a lot of these people are ever going to make it in the film industry, because I just thought they don't care about cinema enough. And it was the people that were deeply passionate about it, that were arguing about cinema on the lunch break, on the bus home, that were staying up late watching movies, that got passionate about some Hungarian film made 30 years ago that had the best shot. They're the people now that are working, and that I continue to collaborate with. And so if you're serious about filmmaking, and you're passionate about wanting to be a filmmaker, then be passionate about cinema as an art form, and just watch a lot and absorb a lot.
Thank you all so much for being here and sharing your wisdom. And yeah, please